Welcome to Dark Knight Films Reviews. I'm your host, Matt Spease, and today, thanks to your voting, and I'm going to introduce one of my guests right now. He is the one and only Buddy Campbell. He is an extraordinary producer, director in his own right, writer, casting director. I mean, this man does it all. Take a bow, buddy.
Thanks, Matt.
And my next guest, I will allow him to introduce himself. John?
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me on this video. My name is John Vasiliou, and you may or may not have noticed, but that name has appeared on a lot of Dark Knight Films projects over the years. And now I've been asked to do a top 10 list of the top 10 slashers. So here we go.
So, how this thing will go is I will go from the number 10 point. Then each of my guests, Buddy and John, will do their number 10. And then we'll move on until we get to our number 1. Alternating between us. So, what is you guys' ranking for the top 10 best slashers? Let me know in the comments down below. And as usual, if you like these kind of videos, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Beginning at number 10, we have The Night Slasher from Cobra. Now, most people won't be considering Cobra, this 80s action film starring Sylvester Stallone, to be much of a slasher film, but it is. The Night Slasher, as played by Brian Thompson, is one of the most creepy and most unnerving characters in all of slasher history. This character has a wicked-looking knife that he uses, and the way he stalks and torments and tries to kill Bridget Nielsen throughout this movie is a sight to see. And the final fight between him and Stallone is total gold. So what do you think, buddy?
Well, first up on my list at number 10 is the legendary Rutger Hauer as John Ryder in the 1986 movie The Hitcher. The movie starts with young driver C. Thomas Howell picks up hitchhiker who turns out to be John Ryder, and lots of twists and turns. A lot of that's been done before, but what makes the most iconic part of this movie is where John kidnaps a waitress played by Jennifer Jason Leigh and actually has her feet tied to a truck and her hands tied to another truck and is threatening to just pull her apart. And that's an iconic moment that makes the character of John Ryder number 10 on my list.
All right. John.
Well, my number 10. This may surprise some people that this is rated. He's rated so low, like number 10. But my number 10 is Chucky. He definitely belongs in the top 10 because he's an icon and everything. But the reason I ranked him so low is because I couldn't really take seriously how well he killed full-grown people and come out so well. All you really have to do is just step on him and he's done. But there you go. Chucky's number 10.
All right, well, let's move on to my number 9, which is The Fisherman, Ben Willis, from the I Know What You Did Last Summer films. Now, I love the character of Ben Willis in the first and second film in the series. He is so well played by Muse Watson. And he would probably be higher on this list if these films, those two films, were the only ones in it. But it's not. Alas, we got a direct-to-video sequel, I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer, which recast the fisherman as an undead killer played by Don Shanks. And nothing against Don Shanks. I like Don Shanks, but this was bad. And it brings this character down on my list, unfortunately. What do you think, buddy?
Next up on my list is from the 2001 movie Joyride. The character's name is Rusty Nail, and he was played by Ted Levine, who most people will remember as the character of Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. However, in this one, the story is about three young travelers going from New Jersey, I believe, to Colorado, played by Paul Walker, Steve Zahn, and Leelee Sobieski. And it starts off as a casual trip for them, and then the guys start getting on the CB radio and start taunting this trucker, making fun of him, teasing him, to the point that he gets so enraged that all hell breaks loose after that. But lesson learned in this: do not taunt and tease truckers, please. Their job is hard enough. And but mostly don't do it because their ride is bigger than yours.
Okay, John, what's your number 9?
My number 9, after much debate and concentration, is Cropsey from The Burning. You know, it's a Friday the 13th clone, obviously, but it's probably the best Friday the 13th clone. Yeah. So, Cropsey, number 9.
Well, coming in at my number 8, we have Charles Lee Ray, a.k.a. Chucky, from the Child's Play series. Now, I'm more interested in this character as Charles Lee Ray than I am as Chucky, to be honest. I mean, I like him as Chucky. I mean, I think, Brad Dourif is great doing the voice of the character, whether he's playing him like that or, or doing the voice of him while his daughter, Fiona Dourif, is playing a younger version of him in the Chucky TV series, which I thought was an interesting take on that character. But I just think Charles Lee Ray is just an interesting serial killer, slasher killer, and definitely deserves to be on this top 10 list. What do you think, buddy?
Well, next up on my list is a character that's on everybody else's list. He's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of movie villains of all time. He's so iconic, everybody knows who he is, and he is Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. You all know who he is. There's nothing that I can tell you about him that you don't already know. He just simply goes on the list because he's such a legend, and that what they were able to do with him, that I think cemented his place in horror history, was him wielding that chainsaw just maniacally around. The guy was crazy, but just the image of him just waving it over his head, it's that's just cinematic gold. And Leatherface at number 8.
Okay, John, what's your number 8?
My number 8 will be Billy from Black Christmas, the precursor to Halloween, and they share a lot in common. The holiday theme thing, and I will place him as my number 8.
Well, coming in at my number 7 is Victor Crowley from the Hatchet series. Now, Victor Crowley may not have the most interesting of looks, but it really gave, in my opinion, gave Kane Hodder a chance to play a slasher character very unique to Jason Voorhees after the makers of the Friday the 13th series decided to completely shaft him as an actor in that series. So, he's brutal as a character. He gets some of the coolest looking kills in slasher movie history in this series. Now, the worst of the films, which probably brings him down the list, if this would have just been 1, 2, 2, and 3 in the Hatchet series, it might have been higher on my list, possibly. But that last film, Victor Crowley, was kind of, there was no reason for it. And there's been no follow-up to it to capitalize on the return of Danielle Harris at the end of it for the post-credit scene. So, who gives a shit about that film? But I love the first 3 Hatchet films. And Kane Hodder is awesome in those roles, or that role. What do you think, buddy?
Well, next up is another actor another character from the Mount Rushmore movie villains, and that is the legendary Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. But listen up, I'm going to tell you something you don't already know about this character. Actually, there's nothing that I know that you don't already know. So, Michael Myers, number 7. Kudos, my man.
All right, John, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is Candyman. Upon great reflection, I realized that Candyman definitely belongs on a top 10 slashers list, but he ultimately fell on my list as number 7. So there you go.
All right. Well, coming in at my number 6 is Norman Bates from the Psycho films. Now, if you were just counting the 1960 original Psycho, Norman wouldn't be too high on this list because he's very charismatic as a character, but he doesn't do much to consider him a very brutal killer other than killing Marion and killing Arbogast. But if you count the second, the third, and 4, the beginning, and 4, the beginning is I consider that fully canon and being a kick-ass origin to the character. Henry Thomas plays a great young version of Norman. And this new Bates Motel series, I mean, I don't have anything against Vera Farmiga, but with all the modern technology they put in that series, when it's supposed to be set before 1960, if you're wanting this to connect to the original film, and then doing that last season to introduce Marion and having her being played, I am not even going to say it. It was stupid. It should have never been done. You wanted to connect this series to the movies, you should have set it in the time period that it's supposed to be set in. Don't bring in modern technology into it. And don't try to redo the original film. No. What do you think, buddy?
Well, next up for me is a character that may not be on everybody's list, but I definitely think that he's one of the most interesting movie villains of all time. From the M. Night Shyamalan movies, Split and Glass, is James McAvoy, very, very underrated actor who played multiple personalities, as you know from these movies. I think he went by Kevin Wendell Crumb and Dennis, I believe, but he was a guy with multiple personalities, and James McAvoy is such a great actor that he was able to be convincing as all of these different personalities, and that's what made him creepy. But he was sadistic and just a psychopath, and to me it was one of the most brilliant performances ever, such an iconic role, and that's why the character from that James McAvoy played in Split and Glass makes my list.
All right, John, what's your number 6?
My number 6 will be Norman Bates, the granddaddy of all slashers.
All right, coming in at number 5 for me is Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Now, Freddy, if they had continued on after part 3, maybe 4, and kept him going in a more serious direction and didn't make him so goofy, a completely horrible joke of a character, with the exception of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which kind of put him back on track, but then they screwed him back up again and went with the same jokey goofball character in Freddy versus Jason. So yeah, he's on this spot for a reason, and it's because of that. Had he continued from 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4, he'd be higher on this list, but as is, he's no. He makes the list at number 5 for me. What do you think, buddy?
Well, next up is a standalone movie from 2000 called American Psycho. The character of Patrick Bateman, played by the legendary Christian Bale. And this movie was directed by Mary Herron, and she was able to take his character and just show how brutal and vicious normal, everyday looking guys can become if they are absolutely nuts. And the character of Patrick Bateman was. It had a great supporting cast with like Jared Leto and Samantha Mathis, Guinevere Turner, Josh Lucas, Willem Dafoe, another great Hollywood movie villain icon. But the brutality of Patrick Bateman in this movie definitely is the reason why he's on the list of greatest movie villains ever.
Okay, John, what's your number 5?
My number 5 will be Matt Cordell from Maniac Cop. Some people describe it as Jason with a badge, but I have no problem with that.
All right, so coming in at number 4 on my list, we have Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. Leatherface, even though he's got a family kind of helping him somewhat in him, he's the most dominant of the members of that family. And from the I would ignore all the films except for the remake and its prequel, the beginning. The original series, I would go from 1 through 3, and then this new film that came out on Netflix. I think it could be considered as a legitimate fourth film in this series, even though they never say that it's a continuation of the first 3 movies. I think it works for his character arc. But Leatherface is just a very uniquely used character, especially in the first film. Second film, he's kind of more played for comic relief. Third film, he's back to being a more serious character. And then this new film on Netflix basically makes him a pretty brutal, badass character again. But, yeah, Leatherface is a very good slasher villain. And a lot of people don't consider him as high on a list like this, but I beg to differ on that. What do you think, buddy?
Well, we're going to go from one psycho to another, from American Psycho to the godfather of psychos, the guy that started it all, Norman Bates, from the legendary Alfred Hitchcock movie Psycho from 1960. It wasn't the first slasher movie ever, but it was the first one that had a following and the most success at that time. And Alfred Hitchcock was able to create an absolute horror movie icon. I keep using icon, but that is exactly what Norman Bates was. And everybody knows the story. They've seen the movie before. The fact that he made it in black and white was brilliant at the time. And having the legendary Janet Leigh in the movie gave it a lot of weight in the movie world. She was a huge name at the time, and a lot of people went to see her. But and she was memorable in her role as Marion Crane. But people just, I'm sure, when they left the theaters back then, all they could talk about was the character of Norman Bates, and that's why he is on my list still yet. After all these years, he's still one of the top movie villains of all time.
What do you think, John? What's your number 4?
My number 4 will be Leatherface. And it is fitting because Leatherface is widely considered the number 4 slasher. So he falls at number 4 on my list.
All right. Now, this is going to be a controversial one for me, but coming in for number 3 for me is Maniac Cop, Matt Cordell, from the Maniac Cop series. This character was played by Robert Zadar throughout the whole series. The only bad film in this series, in my opinion, is the third film, and even in some ways it is good in its own merits. The second film, its only big drawback was killing off the Jack Forrest character at the very beginning, and then killing his girlfriend, Teresa Mallory, later on in the film, not long after that. And they give her a bigger fight scene against him than they did Jack Forrest, because Jack Forrest, they just make him get killed while he's fucking reading a newspaper. So, but Maniac Cop is just a brutal, just the police station massacre that he does in part 2 makes him, high on my list because he just was brutal in that scene. And that is one of the best scenes in any slasher movie, in my opinion. What do you think, buddy?
Well, we're getting down to crunch time. Number 3. And number 3 on my list is Max Cady from Cape Fear. Now, the original came out in 1962, and Max was played by the absolute legendary Robert Mitchum, who did a brilliant job. And his co-stars were Gregory Peck and Martin Balsam. All of those characters were excellent. And but the sequel, or not sequel, but the remake came out in 1991, and it was directed by Martin Scorsese. And this version, with the advanced production qualities, was one of the most scariest movies I have ever seen. And this time around, Max was played by Robert DeNiro. And he was just absolutely brilliant in this role. He, along with Nick Nolte, Jessica Lange, Juliette Lewis, and also Joe Don Baker, the original Walking Tall, the original Sheriff Pusser, was in this movie. But what made it so great, what a nice touch by Scorsese, is that he brought back Robert Mitchum, Gregory Peck, and Martin Balsam, gave them some cameo roles, and it was just a brilliant move. So you had all of those legendary actors in this movie, and it is just out of this world. So number 3, Max Cady from Cape Fear.
All right, John, what's your number 3?
Okay, we're now in the big fray, and this one really fought it out with my number 2. But my number 3 is Fred Krueger himself from Nightmare on Elm Street.
Well, for my number 2 on this list, I'm going with Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th franchise. Now, there's not much else you can say about Jason Voorhees except for the fact that by the 5th through the 8th film in this franchise, the MPAA had cut the balls off of this series to where you couldn't see a lot of the brutality that you saw in parts 1 through 4, and really even 2. The MPAA really dampered that film as well. It wasn't until New Line took over and did their films that they started making him brutal again. And then, of course, you have the remake, which is very brutal as well. And, Jason is at his best as far as being smart and a manipulative, intelligent killer, which none of the other films ever did that with him. But yeah, Jason is... he doesn't make my number 1 because other than the remake, the character is just not too bright. I think most people could escape him. The only reason he's up this high on the list is because he's got a hell of a body count for a killer. But to me, he's not the best overall of killers. What do you think, buddy?
Well, next up is the character that's on everybody's list, probably number 1 on most lists, and that is the legendary Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th franchise. Friday the 13th was the first slasher movie I ever saw as a kid in the theater, and it was creepy as can be, and I couldn't wait for the sequels to come after that. The role is so iconic. Everybody knows who Jason is. They know about the Friday the 13th franchise. Even if they haven't seen it, everybody knows about it. And that is the mark of a legend. And that's what Jason is. He had lots of supporting characters along the way that were great. Like Crazy Ralph, you know. Now if you go, you're doomed. You're all doomed, you know. And but you know, and Kevin Bacon got his start in the first Friday the 13th movie. But the franchise has had its ups and downs over the years. They've made just multiple sequels, but the one constant through it all is the man himself, Jason Voorhees.
How about you, John? What's your number 2?
Okay, we're down to my final 2, and number 2 is Michael Myers from Halloween. You know, a lot of his movies may be crap right now, but that's not the fault of the character. You know, the character earned its place in pop culture, and that's my final word.
Well, coming in at my number 1, I have Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. Now, to me, Michael Myers is the stalker killer that is in the shadows, and then when you least expect it, boom, he strikes and kills in a very simplistic but epic manner. That is the way he was portrayed in the first movie all the way up until the 6th movie. H2O, I would say, probably maintained that. Didn't go too overboard with the kills. Resurrection can eat shit, because that movie sucked. The remake version with Rob Zombie, of course, he upped the violence and he made the character more like Jason Voorhees and less like the classic stalker killer that he was, which made him so unique in those first 6 films. And then this new batch of films from Halloween 2018 all the way to this crap fest of Halloween Ends. I mean, he is basically, again, he's basically just Jason in a Michael Myers outfit. And it's yeah, they got the Michael outfit, you know, mask good, and the outfit looks good. But he acts like frickin' Jason Voorhees. Not my idea of Michael Myers. Michael Myers is a swift, calculating stalker that just stalks in the shadows. You'll see him in the background in scenes, and the next thing you know, boom! Fucker's dead. That's how Michael Myers is supposed to be. And nothing over the top either, you know. Simple, shove somebody up against a wall, stab them, done. Grab somebody, stab them in the throat, done. You know, simple, but effective. Not like this Rob Zombie shit or, you know, these Halloween 2018 to ends garbage where, you know, he's constantly stabbing somebody over and over and over and over again with different knives just to see which one is the best. You know, that's not Michael Myers. That is Jason Voorhees. That is something Jason would do, not Michael. Get your shit straight, people. If you're going to make a Halloween movie, do it like the original series, which the original series to me is 1 through 6. And if I'm being honest, it should have really ended with 4, with him being gunned down by the police and falling down the mine shaft. Because, I mean, that was a definitive good ending for my man Michael Myers. What do you think, buddy?
Well, here we are at the top, and I'm going to throw a curveball here to everybody. My number one is not on a lot of lists, I'm sure, and probably not on as number one on very many lists, but the character that I put at number one is so scary when I saw the movie, because it showed that normal, everyday, lovable, likable people can be as psychotic as the creepy guy, and that's what we have in this case. Now, the movie I'm talking about is based on a Stephen King novel. It came out in 1990. It was directed by Rob Reiner, and the movie is called Misery. And the character that I have at number one is the role of Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates. Now, the movie is basically dominated by two people, and that's the lead roles of Annie Wilkes alongside the legendary James Caan, who played the role of Paul Sheldon. Now, Paul is a writer of a series of books that Annie liked. She was, as she says herself, Paul's number one fan, because she had to read every new book. The series of books that Paul wrote was called Misery, and he had decided that this book was the one he just wrote was going to be his last one, and he was going to end the series. Well, he's driving along in a snowstorm, and then he has a bad wreck, and he's saved by this kind nurse living by herself out in the woods, played by Annie Wilkes. Now, he is in too bad a shape to get to a hospital, but because she was a nurse, she was able to care for him. And as she's and the roads are out, she can't, they can't get an ambulance there. He's stuck in this house with her, and as she's healing him back to health, he makes the mistake of letting her read his last novel. And when she finds out that the series of books is going to end right there, she loses it. She is deranged. She is pissed. She is just enraged that her favorite books are coming to an end, and so she takes it out on this poor writer of Paul Sheldon, and the brutality that she invokes on him is the stuff of legend. And that's why I have Annie Wilkes as my number one horror villain of all time.
And John, what's your number one?
Okay, my number one, I guess there's a hint back there hanging on the wall. My number one is Jason Voorhees of Friday the 13th. To me, in my opinion, there's never been a pure slasher, a character that deserves a name as Jason Voorhees, and for that reason, he's my number one, the best, the cream of the crop. Jason.
Well, bunch of varied opinions on it. What are you guys' ideas? Where do you rank these slashers? Do you agree with my list? Do you agree with Buddy's list? Do you agree with John's list? Let me know in the comments down below what you think the top 10 best slasher villains are. And as usual, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I hope you've enjoyed me doing this with my partners in crime. And I will see you next time.